for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lester. Appreciate it.
We got a lot to.
There's our shining boy we're riding with.
These folks to drive
riding with Biden, baby.
As we can, but I've got to ask you about some of the things that Holly just mentioned there. The president discharged from the hospital today, flown aboard Marine One back to the White House. At one point, he climbs
the lighting
the stairs,
is
and
not
he takes
good
his
on
mask
him.
off with other people who appeared to be somewhat nearby. Did you see it? Did you hear about it? What's your reaction, sir?
I would hope that the president, having gone through what he went through, and I'm glad he seems to be coming along pretty well, would communicate the right lesson to the American people. Masks matter. These masks, they matter. It matters. It saves lives. It prevents the spread of the disease. Social distancing. Instead of talking about what the only thing I heard was one of the tweets saying that, you know, don't be so concerned about all this, essentially. There's a lot to be concerned about. 210,000 people have died. You have, about 1,000 people a day getting the coronavirus, 50,000 a week. I mean, so it's a great concern. I hope no one walks away with the message thinking that it is not a problem. It's a serious problem. It's an international pandemic, and we have 4% of the population and 20%
I know why
of the deaths.
Biden is going off about this, because it's good messaging,
to the president
but also it's so delusional that people think that Trump going through this experience would give him a new take on the pandemic.
The decision was that would probably be intrusive, but I'm truly happy that if he appears to be, if things are really moving along like he said, and particularly the First Lady as well, I'm very happy for that.
You have built your campaign around the coronavirus has been your number one issue. So when you hear that this president was infected with COVID-19, were you surprised?
Quite frankly, I wasn't surprised. Look, for the last 3 months, 3 times a week, I'm on the telephone and on Zoom with some of the leading immunologists in the nation, and they go through everything that's happening. And so the idea that COVID does not spread in proximity when you don't have a mask on, when you're not socially distancing, when there's large groups of people.
I just have to say, it bears repeating. It is insane that we are still talking about basic health precautions for COVID-19. Like, it's been what, like 8 months of this? Like, people have been like locked down for 8 months, doing their best to avoid other people, not seeing friends, not being able to see their family in the hospital. And yet we still are talking about, like, yeah, you need to wear a mask while we're in the middle of this pandemic, because otherwise you could be infecting people. And this is why this talking point is such a giant win for Joe, because it's a slam dunk. Like, and it should be. Like, this should be an issue that they can use to just nail Trump down on. Because I don't know if any of you saw, but there was an entire reveal that stated that the campaign's entire plan, Trump's campaign, was to hammer Joe about being a big, like, piss baby about, oh, COVID's a pandemic, you have to take it seriously, and they were gonna, like, try and get him on that. And now of course they can't, because Trump has it. Although I get the feeling, given the recent developments and the messaging that the president has been putting out about his infection, that they're still going to try and go ahead with that and, like, downplay his illness and say, oh, Trump has it, it's not that bad. In fact, I saw a headline today, basically where Trump was accusing, or the Trump campaign was accusing Biden of, like, somehow being weaker for not having had COVID. And, like, Trump has it and knows how it is, so he can fight it better. Like, we're gonna get some insane messaging like that doesn't make any sense outside of the, like, 95% of Republicans who think that Trump is a god king. Okay, we're gonna see a lot of that. You gotta prep yourselves for that. Gird your loins, because we're gonna see it. We're gonna see it come down hard. Anyway.
When you're inside, particularly, but even when you're outside, that's not surprising. And again, we keep forgetting, or we're not talking about it. 210,000 people have died already. And the expectation is if nothing changes, we're going to have another 200,000 dead by the end of the year. That's 400,000 dead, God forbid if that happens. That's more than were killed in 1 year in America than 4 years in World War II.
I want to ask you about the information we've been given on the president's medical condition from his doctors at Walter Reed, also some of the information about his condition from the White House. Do you think that the doctors have been forthcoming, that they've been transparent? Do you trust the assessments we've been hearing?
I'm not going to second guess his doctors. He has some of the best health care in the world, and I'm happy it was available to him. It should be available to the President of the United States of America. But the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of people here in this audience, your cameramen, if God forbid something happened to them, they don't have that access to that care. So it's comparing sort of apples and oranges a little bit.
You were on the debate stage with the president for 90 minutes. You were socially distant, but hearing that he was infected, did you have a moment of pause, of worry, of concern for your own safety?
No, because, look, I've been fastidious about the social distancing. I've been fastidious about wearing a mask when I'm not socially distanced, and even then remaining socially distanced. And so we never got closer than you and I are right now, as well as when Melania came up on the stage, she smiled and waved. I waved to her, but it was the same distance. Was a little disconcerting to look out and see that his whole section, no one had masks on. When my wife was sitting further down, had a mask on, the people with us had masks on. I didn't quite get that.
You were able to see that from where you were?
Yes, when they came in, yes. Because I was standing backstage, and you could see people coming in, and a lot of people didn't have masks on.
If you become president, can you pledge transparency about your health if, God forbid, something like this happened or some other health issue, that you would be forthcoming
yes,
with the American people?
I can understand there can be certain circumstances relating to national security where every detail would not be made available in the middle of a particular crisis.
Good answer.
Like
he's looking really good here.
Be
okay.
Transparent about whether or not I had
little
a
stutters,
problem,
but he's
or
good.
What treatment I got. Yes, but sometimes for a president that would come after the fact. So I'm not being critical of the fact that every single detail was not released. There is the HIPAA rules. They even apply to president, but they have consequences for a president beyond the rules relating to what is able to be done and not done without a patient's permission. They have national security implications as well.
So that is to say that you wouldn't, some things you think would be okay to hold back?
Well, only on the margins and only for the moment. In other words, I can't imagine, you know, other presidents have been through it. I was there when Ronald Reagan was shot. He was transparent, but they didn't go into every single detail precisely. And that's one of my buddies going out by it. But all kidding
okay,
aside,
that's a charming little joke there.
To tell the whole truth.
Say what you want about Joe. He's a very charming man.
What's happening and what's going on. But
you might not,
moment to moment, I'm not sure.
Whatever you feel about him, he's very
requirement.
charming.
But you cannot mislead about certain things, and I'm not saying they have. If, in fact, the president had, in fact, contracted the virus and knew it before he went on in the public, encounters and was not wearing a mask, that's a different thing.
Yeah, one more question on this before we move on and hear from some of the voters. A recent poll said 65% of Americans think the president bears some responsibility for contracting this virus. Do you agree?
Did he say, wait, I need to back that up. Did he say 65%?
The president had, in fact, contracted. I think on balance, you have to tell the whole truth, what had happened, what was happening, and what's going on. But as moment to moment, I'm not sure that is an absolute requirement. But you cannot mislead about certain things, and I'm not saying they have. If, in fact, the president had, in fact, contracted the virus and knew it before he went on in the public, encounters and was not wearing a mask, that's a different thing.
Yeah, one more question to this before we move on and hear from some of the voters. A recent poll said 65% of Americans think the president bears some responsibility for contracting this.
Only 65%. Guys, let me tell you. If literally anyone else had been president, we probably would have had, at max, 20,000 people die. And that's maximum. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there was the distinct possibility that this could have been like, H1N1 levels of infection. And with that one, that was 14,000. There are countries on Earth that have had like 5 deaths, 100 deaths. And the United States, the richest country that has ever existed in the history of the world, we have 200,000 people dead. We're getting outperformed by like Vietnam, which has only happened once before. And like that should be an indicator to you of how colossal a fuck up this is. And they even had a plan specifically to deal with pandemics like this, and Trump specifically went out of his way to scrap that and defund the infectious disease, the group that would deal with infectious diseases and pandemics. And we talked about this last week. Even right now, they just took like $300 million from the CDC in the middle of this historic pandemic to buy an ad campaign with celebrities, to tell people that, you should wear a mask, which is, again, something we should have done like 7 months ago, 8 months ago, like a long, long time ago, when this was still a containable thing. No, as far as I'm concerned, this is like, 90% Trump's fault. Like the other 10% belongs to the people who have enabled him, and it's pretty awful. Okay. I'm frustrated that even at this point, now granted, in political terms, 65% is a lot of people, because it's the overwhelming majority, 15% over 50%, but that's still real low. That still means 35% of people think that Trump had nothing to do with it. So yeah, we still have some work to do on this one, guys. But when history looks back on this, it's going to remember it as one of Trump's most colossal fuck-ups.
Virus. Do you agree?
Look.
Also, I see the Big Earl in chat there. Biden is a racist pedo. I think that Biden is probably a racist on some level, but probably kind of along that, like, old liberals who are like, don't think that they are racist, but like keep kind of spewing like casual racist bigotry, or like supporting policies that they don't, necessarily know are racist. I feel like he's racist in that way. Whereas Trump is just explicitly racist, like will not allow black people in his buildings, kind of racist. So, I mean, like in that regard, I think obviously Trump is by far the most racist and the most likely to build his platform around racism. And as far as like the pedophile stuff, like Trump has literally bragged about how awesome it was that he could go into underage girls' like changing rooms and look at them naked. And he also has lawsuits against him by underage women girls who are now women who were underage, who claim that he raped them. So those are things that happened. Joe Biden's creepy around women, and I haven't seen any evidence that he has raped children, unlike Donald Trump. So, like, I feel like in both of those categories, like, yeah, you could call him some names. You could call them both some names, but if you're kind of examining where they're both at, Trump is by far the more racist and more pedophilic one, like exponentially more.
Anybody who contracts the virus,
Yeah, I can turn on closed
are
captions.
essentially saying,
Sorry about that. I probably
masks
should have
don't
just done that in the
matter,
first place.
social distancing doesn't matter, I think is responsible for what happens to them. If these people took off their masks,
I mean, I the big I the big girl. It's not whataboutism. I'm saying that there are some merits to what you're saying, but also because this is very clearly in an election context where we have choices between either Biden or Trump. The having the additional context of that is kind of necessary when making such claims.
and they all have them on, I noticed, and just all of a sudden got in a gaggle and started talking to one another, well, they're taking responsibility that, in fact, they should be held responsible for. Because every major scientist and doctor and immunologist has said that's a very dangerous thing to do. The particles and droplets can stay in the air for a long time, longer than they thought. It can go beyond 10 feet. There's all kinds of things they've learned and know. And look, I view wearing this mask not so much protecting me, but as a patriotic responsibility. All the tough guys say, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not afraid. Well, be afraid for your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your neighbor, your coworker. That's who you're protecting having this mask on.
This is the kind of messaging we've needed for months. And whatever you have to say about Biden, at least he's, giving us this messaging. Because apparently there are so many people who still haven't heard this stuff yet. So this is a good thing. I think that Biden, so far, we're, not super far into this. He's been doing a really good job.
And it should be viewed as a patriotic duty to protect those around you.
You ready to hear from some voters now?
Sure.
All right, let's bring up, first of all, Vanessa Tamaris. Vanessa, nice to see you.
Hi, Vanessa.
Thank you for being with us. What's your question for the Vice President?
Hi, Vice President Biden. Sorry, I'm a little nervous here.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Thank you, sir. Vice President Biden, I work in Miami
Awkward.
as a pediatric nurse. And since the beginning of this pandemic, the government has been dysfunctional and disorganized in their
Can't hear her,
response.
Lester.
Can't hear it.
Miami-Dade County leads the state of Florida in the number of COVID cases and deaths. And Florida just ranked number 2 in the COVID cases of children. Another larger wave is expected this fall, sir. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan is that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and also any other future pandemics that may arise?
We're able to hear.
Okay, look, I know that Biden won't be able to say this, but at this point, an additional pandemic response, there is no pandemic response that can be proposed that won't be incredibly divisive, right? So, no matter what they do, people are going to say it's too much because, there are people who are already, right now, saying, oh, we can't close down again, even though closing down for, another couple weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, would, if we had it on a federal level, nationwide, would probably solve most of our COVID problems. The issue being that it is now so politicized that we can't do that. And we did it wrong the first time and caused more damage than was necessary. So now we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot either way, in a political sense. And the other problem is, even getting people to wear masks has now been politicized. So, funding for masks for hospitals or, funding to send masks to every household or whatever, things that would have helped at the beginning of the pandemic now are kind of seen as, these political items, right? It's no matter what your response is at this point, it's going to be divisive. There's nothing on this issue that's going to be able to bring us all together. Unlike other countries where it was largely seen as apolitical to make sure your populace can live through a pandemic. But yeah, let's see. I mean, no, I, the big Earl, the idea is that you would close everything down and provide like businesses and people with enough money to live through that week. And then, for however long it's closed down. And because it is nationwide, and instead of, whereas before when we shut down, each state did it individually. And you know what the problem is with doing that? It's that each state, with the exception of, like Hawaii or Alaska, has people who can just cross the border and go to a state that's not closed down. And so you still had people spreading COVID. And the first shutdown did help. We saw the numbers go down, but now that things are opening up again, the numbers are going back up. And if we had a full close down across the entire nation, coordinated by the federal government, with the appropriate support to enable businesses and families to survive, I think that would be much more effective. And it's not just me. Experts agree too, because that's what most nations on Earth did. And most nations on Earth have like 200 deaths tops from COVID. We have 200,000. So that's kind of the difference, right? And also, I'm not saying close down and let everybody die if they're poor, or businesses die if they don't have money to cover the expenses of shutting down like that. Obviously, you give them additional support.
Okay.
Sir.
I can hear part of it. I'm sorry. The television in front of you, and I didn't catch the front.
Yeah, and we got the traffic. I mean, the meat of her question is another larger wave expected this fall. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan
Yes.
that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and any other future pandemics that will arise?
Well, first of all, as President of the United States, I would make a federal mandate on federal property.
Actually, the big Earl, you can just give money out. That is a thing that you can do if you're the federal government. And obviously, it wouldn't be a lockdown until you get the vaccine. What you would be doing is locking down so that everyone who currently has COVID has like the time and means to get tested and can then go to the hospital or fully quarantine. And by the time our lockdown is done, then you know basically who has it, who doesn't have it, and you can kind of resume normal activity if you don't have COVID-19. Like it's pretty straightforward, okay? It's not rocket science.
Property, federal buildings, you must wear a mask, period, and you must...
Well, yeah, European, like all economies are down after a lockdown. That's what happens because it interrupts like all trade and activity. The issue here is that if you don't do it properly, then people keep getting sick and keep dying, which is in the long run worse for an economy. Like letting 200,000 people die is really bad for the economy. Okay, like that's not good. It doesn't affect the stock market, so rich people don't care that much. But for the overall economy in the long run, we're still very hurt by this loss. And we're going to keep getting hurt by it because, like, instead of, locking down and being able to resume normal activity, we are locking down and now having to adjust all of our industries to deal with life during a pandemic, which costs exponentially more money. Or you let people die, which puts an undue burden on the healthcare system and also hurts the economy. So better to just hurt the economy without people dying, I guess, is my general take on it. Especially because we're very able to do that. We could do it. Every other nation on Earth has managed to do it. I feel like this is a no-brainer. Okay.
Be socially distanced, number one. Number two, I would make sure we move very rapidly to get testing available to everyone that's quickly available. So people can, in fact, be in a position where they can open their businesses. They can test their employees, test people coming in. I would make sure that we're in a situation.
Also, I agree with you, the big Earl. The economy going down does cost lives, which is why I advocate for better social welfare programs so that people who are poor or out of work don't die in the gutter, right? And have the mental health care and physical health care that they need to survive, and like also are able to get food. Like, I support these programs that would solve the problems that you are saying the economy going down would implement. Just saying that the people dying in a bad economy is a result of capitalism, which is not something that I agree with.
Situation, I don't know whether you have children. If you have children and they're not in school, well, you have to make a tough decision. Many people.
Okay. We'll have to back this up because I know I keep pausing it and unpausing it, and it's getting all screwed up. But like, the Big Earl, like, are you trying to say that every European country has lost over 200,000 people because their respective economies went down by 20%? Because, like, I do not believe that a pandemic is equal to the number of people who die in a bad economy. I don't think that is the case. However, I do agree with you that capitalism is bad and leads to those people dying. And so I would like to address capitalism as soon as possible, and the failures of capitalism as soon as possible. By the way, one of those failures of capitalism is the boom and bust pattern that repeats over time. That's why we have growth and then a bust and then growth and then a bust. Like, it happens like every 5 to 7 years throughout like our history. And it would probably be better under socialism, right? You wouldn't have as many predatory capital businesses taking advantage of the system and leading to these booms and busts. You would just have a nice steady growth, right? At least ideally. But you're kind of comparing two different things, and I don't think in this particular case that saying that like a pandemic that has killed more people in like 6 months than all of World War I, and saying like, oh, well, just as many people would die under a 20% dip in the economy. I don't think that's true. Over a course of 6 months. Maybe in the long term, a 20% dip would kill that many people, but I think if a pandemic continues over that same amount of time, it's probably going to kill even more people. Anyway, I'm not being very persuasive right now, am I?
Do you in fact stay
I just think you're
home
kind of being silly.
and not be able to pay your rent because you have to take care of your child?
And we're going to back this
up. What patriotic duty to protect those around you?
You ready to hear from some voters now?
Sure.
All right, let's bring up, first of all, Vanessa Tamaris. Vanessa, nice to see you.
Hi, Vanessa.
Thank you for being with us. What's your question for the Vice President?
Hi, Vice President Biden. Sorry, I'm a little nervous here.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Thank you, sir. Vice President Biden, I work in Miami as a pediatric nurse. And since the beginning of this pandemic, the government has been dysfunctional and disorganized in their response.
Can't hear her, Lester.
Can't hear it.
Miami-Dade County leads the state of Florida in the number of COVID cases and deaths. And Florida just ranked number 2 in the COVID cases of children. Another larger wave is expected this fall, sir. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan is that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and also any other future pandemics that may arise?
Were you able to hear
Thank
okay?
you, sir.
I can hear part of it. I'm sorry. The television in front of you, and I didn't catch the front.
Yeah, no, we got the traffic. I mean, the meat of her question is another larger wave expected this fall. Can you tell us what the Biden-Harris federal response plan that would unite our country in fighting this pandemic and any other future pandemics that will arise?
Well, first of all, as President of the United States, I would make a federal mandate on federal property, federal buildings. You must wear a mask, period, and you must be socially distanced, number one. Number two, I would make sure we move very rapidly to get testing available to everyone that's quickly available, so people can, in fact, be in a position where they can open their businesses, they can test their employees, test people coming in. I would make sure that we're in a situation, I don't know whether you have children. If you have children and they're not in school, well, you have to make a tough decision, many people. Excuse my back, I apologize. But do you, in fact, stay home and not be able to pay your rent because you have to take care of your child? What do you do? Those very difficult decisions. And so so the way we know how to open schools safely, I laid out a plan all the way back in the beginning of the summer. We should provide them for the ventilation they need, by all the needs that they have for masks and social distancing and testing. For example, the president had committed, and FEMA had the Emergency Management Organization said we're going to give masks to teachers as well as to the students. And then the administration said, well, no, guess what? That's not a national emergency. Well, what in God's name is a national emergency if that's not a national emergency? So it costs money to deal with all of these things, and we should, in fact, be using the money passed by the Congress to see to it that people can open their businesses safely, be able to keep their employees on the payroll, making sure they can have the sanitation capacity and ability to sanitize their stores as well as their schools. All of those things we will do. And more. I know I'm going on too long, but there's a lot here that relates to what's totally within our wheelhouse.
Well, can I follow up with that a little bit?
Sure.
I heard you mention this idea of a national mandate.
Yes.
You've mentioned that before for masks. But what power does a president have to make that happen?
Beyond the federal property. I would go out and I would call all the governors to the White House. Some probably wouldn't come. And I'd call the governors and I'd say to the mayors as well as the county executives, take responsibility. Take responsibility and lay out the guidelines.
This is such a Biden move, and I think it's playing to his liberal base, but the idea that you have to take responsibility. I feel like the Trump administration is an exercise in how you don't really, but this reliance on the fundamental honorability of politicians, I think, is misguided at best and misleading at worst.
Look, folks, one of the problems is this president said, I take no responsibility. Literally, it's not my responsibility. Well, if it's not his responsibility, he talked about this being like a time of war. We are under attack. As I said earlier, 200,000 plus have died. 50,000 a day are getting the virus. 1,000 a day thereabouts are dying. This is a national emergency. And so the president should take responsibility, and the federal government has an obligation to lay out basic guidelines, and the science matters. Listen to the scientists.
All right. Let's get another question. Vanessa, thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Jonathan Pines. He's an undecided voter from Hollywood, Florida, a registered Republican.
I mean, I the big Earl, you know who also has a really big population? China. And China doesn't have the same number of deaths from COVID-19 per capita than any of the other capitalist countries that you're talking about. And you know why that is? It's because they are an authoritarian country. And I'm not gonna defend China as being this bastion of morality or a good country, but one of the benefits of being an authoritarian country is the fact that they can just go, okay, everyone in this area is locked down. You have no say in it. You just are. And in the case of a pandemic, that's particularly helpful because while you are infringing on the liberty of your population, it does contain a pandemic pretty effectively. And the problem here is that China was willing to take that hit very early on, which means that now they are fully open and, for the most part, operational again with minor losses. Whereas a lot of European countries decided that they were going to politicize the issue. For example, the UK, where they also really downplayed the pandemic. That leads to a lot of confused messaging, and that confusion and politicization means that a lot of people kind of associating the virus with foreign influence, which puts it in especially conservative parties against taking measures to stop the virus because they think it's a foreign hoax or something. And the result is that a lot of places that try and lock down don't do it very well. especially when there are economic incentives to stay open, or you can get away with staying open, or things like that. So, and that means that the virus can continue to spread. So what I'm saying is we need like an actually good lockdown that is able to address these problems and these failings. And like, I hear what you're saying about the per capita deaths, but also the United States is in the top 10. Like, like again, Vietnam below us, Panama below us. Like, are you saying that the United States is incapable of doing better when it comes to healthcare than Vietnam? Are you saying that we can't do it better than like most of the world's population? Because like I'm a patriot, friend. I believe that America can do better and should do better. So like I don't know what your point is. But it just seems kind of like you're obfuscating the fact that over 200,000 people have died in the United States alone, and you're trying to hide the reality of that figure behind like, oh, the population of the U.S. is just really big, so that's why it's bad here, but that doesn't account for everything else. Like one of the reasons Sweden is so high on like the per capita list is because they refuse to lock down. And it turns out that that causes the pandemic to spread all over the place. So, like, you just can't compare countries like that. I mean, I feel like you can. I feel like you can, though. like, America is the wealthiest nation to ever exist, and per capita, the wealthiest nation to ever exist. Or at least one of the wealthiest nations. I don't have the data in front of me right now, but I know we're up there. So like saying, oh, no, you can't compare this supremely wealthy country to Vietnam, a relatively poor country that was ravaged by war that we inflicted on them. I feel like you can compare them. And the fact that we don't add up is the reason that you are saying that we shouldn't compare them, because it is not a good look for us, which I think is a pretty weak reason to say that you shouldn't do that. Because I think you can compare policies in countries. Like, that's how we learn about governance. That's how we do better. And that's how we've always done better. So, like, do you think when, like, the phrase, like, you have to remember history so you don't repeat the mistakes of the past, or however that goes, do you think that when they said that, they were just talking about, like, American history? Like, do you think that, like, oh, no, like, the British can actually only learn from British history, and, like, the Iranians can only learn from Iranian history, and when you're learning from history, you're not, you have to only look at one country at a time. You can't look at the surrounding context. No, that's stupid. That's just not how any kind of study or understanding arises. So I think if that's the way you're kind of thinking about this, you've been hoodwinked by people with very dodgy rhetoric in order to think this way and justify things.
I think he says he's leaning toward you. What's your question?
I can't see Jonathan, but I'll back up here. Maybe I can see you from there. The camera
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Look at this fresh-faced young man.
I want to get the camera shot.
Thank you. I agree. In light of recent events, it's obvious that the pandemic can reach anyone. While the health and lives of the American people should come first, there's been a combination of fear, shutdowns, isolationism, conflicting data, and school closings. And these have long-lasting effects which have taken both a psychological and financial toll on nearly all of us. How do you plan to balance these factors with the expectation that COVID will be with us for the foreseeable future?
Well, first of all, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Science matters. There's overwhelming scientific consensus. The president's own head of CDC, Dr. Redfield, held up a mask and said, if you put this mask on between now and January, you'll save 100. He said, it's more important than a virus, than a vaccine. You can save more lives. They've laid out the University of Washington, one of the great universities that lays out all these projections. They said there could be 200,000 people dead between now and January. And they said if you wear a mask, we can save 100,000 lives. Now, what is this macho thing, I'm not going to wear a mask? What's the deal here? Big deal. Does it hurt you? Be patriotic, for God's sake. Take care of yourself, but take care of your neighbors. And so the one thing we have to do is we have to unite the country. One of the reasons when I said I was running, I had 3 objectives. One, to restore the soul of this country so we start acting with a decency that reflects who we are. Secondly, rebuild the middle class. And thirdly, unite the country. Remember, I was roundly criticized in my primaries. You can't unite the country. We must. It's the only way we can move forward. And the country is ready to be united, I believe. They're ready to be united. And we have to just change the way we talk to one another. Politics has become so mean and so ugly that we got to get rid of that. We got to just start talking to each other like we respect each other, which we have to.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Our next question comes.
Vietnam, as far as I know, isn't an island. In case I missed. Maybe I missed some geography lessons, but I don't think Vietnam's an island. Chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the issue here isn't that you're comparing it to just one island. If that were the case, I would think maybe you have a point, I the Big Earl. The problem is that we're comparing it not to one island, we're comparing the United States to all of the other countries in the world, and the fact that we, the richest nation on earth, are doing such a piss poor job of managing a pandemic is really a real indicator that we have fucked up and that we could be doing a whole lot better. I feel like that's a reasonable conclusion to come to, given the wealth of this country. Okay? So, like, I don't know, like India has like 1 billion people. They're not doing worse than us, and they're physically closer to China. But whatever. You are completely ignoring Europe. No, I'm not. We could also talk about how Germany's doing a much better job. We could talk about how most of Europe is actually doing a much better job than the United States. I mean, you've taken a couple data points like Sweden, Spain, the UK, but the problem here is that those countries have specific reasons why they are doing poorly, and all of those reasons have to do with a massive bungling of a pandemic response that is politicized, or being too afraid to take the economic hit that would otherwise reduce their pandemic death tolls. So, like, I don't know. Like, you're saying you shouldn't compare island countries, and then you're also talking about, like, oh, well, Europe and the UK. I need to remind you, the UK is a small island country, but, like, you're being really inconsistent, and it's kind of funny, okay? Like, you need to get out of this shitty rhetoric you found yourself, like, hoodwinked by, and, like, actually, like, just accept that we're in a bad situation that we could fix if we wanted to. We just don't. And we don't because it would cost money to rich people. So let's continue.
Brian Smith, he's a recently unemployed flight attendant who started an online support group for laid off airline workers.
That's good.
I, the Big Earl, the UK and the USA are more equivalent. The issue is that the reason Vietnam isn't as equivalent to the United States or the UK is that they are much weaker and smaller and poorer than us. On a per capita level, they are poorer than us. And that means that the fact that they are managing the pandemic better than we are should tell us something. And it should tell us that we are doing a bad job, because if we were doing a good job, we would be handling it even better than Vietnam. Like, that's the point I'm trying to make. Also, we could dive into how Vietnam's healthcare system is probably better than the United States's. Like, maybe not the quality in 100% of areas, but at least I believe they have some form of nationalized healthcare, which I guess it seems to have worked there to help stop this pandemic, so thumbs up for Vietnam.
Hello, I want to thank you, sir, for having me here and taking my question. I am one of over 8,000 flight attendants that American Airlines had to furlough this past weekend. And my question to you is, if you're elected president, what will you do to restore the travel and tourism industry, to get it back on its feet and get it back up to pre-COVID levels so that we're just not throwing more money at it?
Well, look, my best friend, I'm a lucky man. I'm married into a family with 5 daughters. That means that one of them always loves you, not the same one. Even when your wife's mad, there's always one with you. One of
Joe,
my
what are you doing?
sister-in-law is an attendant, and she's been for a long, long time, facing the same kind of thing you're facing. We could have, in fact, already solved that problem. The Congress passed the legislation to provide the money to keep the airlines up and running, and to provide for the kinds of ways in which you can sanitize that aircraft, make sure everyone has on a mask. For example, recently, the Department of Transportation turned down a request from bus drivers and mass transit people and you guys of saying everybody to get in a plane has to have a mask on. If they don't have a mask on, then they can't get in the plane. What are we doing? Do you feel comfortable being being attendant and people getting on a crowded plane or not a crowded plane with no mask? You don't. It's just to protect you, protect one another. It's within our power to do it. And look, one of the things we have to do is we have to provide funding for people who have been caught in the lurch. Look, the president, and he should, got great medical care. But that's why I'm arguing from the very beginning of this. Everyone who contracts COVID should have their bills paid for. People can't afford.
Everyone who contracts anything should have their bills paid for. We should have Medicare for all. Like, that's basically what he's advocating here, but for some reason just for one specific malady. It would actually help way more people and be cheaper long term if we just covered everybody by a nationalized healthcare system.
This, and we're in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Already 10 million people have lost their employer-based insurance, their COBRA-based insurance, 10 million. And they're in court trying to do away with another 20 million who already get it through Obamacare. And in addition to that, 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. You know people who've had COVID. I hope I'd be wonderful you didn't. But if you do, you know you end up with heart problems and lung scarring. They become pre-existing conditions. So there's a lot of things we can do. But guess what, folks? If we can spend money giving tax breaks for racehorse, we can give tax breaks for the kinds of things we're out there doing, 3 martini lunch. God almighty, why can't we, in fact, give a tax break for people, a free access to health care if you're in the middle of a COVID crisis?
All right, thank you. We're going to take...
By the way, I just have to say, personally, I love my insurance. I love nothing better than every year sitting down and going as a freelancer, it's time for me to pick my new insurance provider and insurance plan. And it's literally like Christmas. I open up the state site where I can buy my insurance, and I kind of titter to myself as I scroll through all of the plans that will likely leave me bankrupt even if I go with the most expensive option. And I get sick with something. But you know what? Even though it doesn't really matter which plan I get, at least I have that freedom. But you know what? I'm willing to give up that freedom if it means that everyone in the United States can be covered. Because fun fact, did you know, just if we're talking about children, that there are around a little over 4 million kids who are not covered by any kind of insurance right now? 4 million children. And did you know that on top of that, there are around 37 million children who are under Medicaid? Now, you might think, oh, well, that's good. Like, Medicaid surely helps, and it does. But the thing about Medicaid is it doesn't cover everything. So if you're under Medicaid as a kid and something goes wrong, you still have a medical bill to pay. So, I mean, I as much as I love the freedom of sitting down and scrolling through lists of what different insurance plans will protect me from and what they won't, and losing myself in the mind-numbing bureaucracy that is health insurance, I'd be willing to give that up if it means that over 40 million kids can be completely covered. If it means every kid can be completely covered. If it means every other person in the United States can be covered. I would give up that personal freedom. Essentially making me kind of like Jesus. So I think, I would do that. Maybe you should too.
Take a short break. We'll be back with more questions from our voters to Vice President Joe Biden after this break.
Done randomly. I am a freelance writer and editor. I've been doing that for about 8 years? No. Like a decade. And I'm also a podcaster. I do all kinds of content creation stuff, and I decided I'd throw myself into the realm of political commentary, try and make the world a better place and advocate for my lefty political situation. All right.
And their family.
Our
Attention was in depth.
Biden.
I can hear you.
Watching the debate, I noticed that President Trump was bullying you, and I'm worried that it knocked you off your game. How do I know that you're able to forcefully lead this country moving forward when being faced with unforeseen challenges and other bullies?
Honestly, the Big Earl, there are problems with the way the UK does its nationalized healthcare system, but I need to say that it does so many things better than the United States' healthcare system. For example, I got my gallbladder out last year. And it cost me like $10,000. Like, it was a lot of money, okay? My dad had to go in for like an emergency spine surgery. That cost like $15,000. Like, things can just happen here, and most people don't have that kind of money just laying around. In fact, most people in the United States, statistically, don't have $400 to cover unexpected expenses, okay? So, the need for a system like this is overwhelming, because most people just go into massive debt and then spend the rest of their lives trying to work that off.
Well, I'm used to bullies. I used to stutter when I was a kid. I learned how to fight. I got a nickname. They called me Shoe Leather. I was little, but they could beat me up, and I hurt them in the process. Look, I was surprised to learn
Biden,
that Chris Wallace said there were 158 interruptions in that debate we had. And it was just very difficult
They called me Shoe Leather.
Further demean the process of the debate
called me
by
Shoe Leather. I
getting
can't get
in a shouting match with him. On the one hand, and I tried very hard, if you notice, to look in the camera and answer the questions directly, but they kept getting banged. I hope this next meeting we're going to have is called.
I hope every story that Biden tells has him getting a funny nickname.
Supposedly coming up, but I hope we at least have an opportunity to hear the question and answer the question directly before there's an interruption. But as I said to the president, not here, not tonight, not me. I'm not putting up with it.
Wait, Chet. Do you remember? Did he also have a funny nickname from the Corn Pop story that he told? Did Joe Biden also have a funny nickname in that one, like from the bike chain or something like that? Let's see. Political violence should be celebrated. It is a core U.S. value. In the words of Thomas Jefferson, the blood of the patriots and fascists shall spill all over this nation. I mean, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, but I don't think you should celebrate violence, but also historically we have celebrated violence. Like, I don't know how else you could interpret something like Columbus Day. So the idea that you can't celebrate political violence really just kind of comes down to what the prevailing power structure is. But I also don't personally advocate for violence of any kind. So please don't do anything violent, okay? Don't do it. You use your words. Right, every wall will fall. I totally get it. Like, tough as shoe leather. It's still a very funny nickname. Oh man, done randomly. Do not feel bad for people who are studying political history right now, because I'm sure this will be a very fascinating time for people to investigate. Like, they will enjoy learning about this. Assuming that in the future we have schools and not just like post-apocalyptic roving gangs that like the only education system is like how to skewer a lizard under the 800-degree sun while you go out covered in heat-resistant gel from our caves underneath the ocean. Oh, okay. I mean, I wasn't joking, but I still wanted to address your point because you know what? Some people don't understand that. Okay, some people don't like genuinely think that violence is okay, and violence is only okay as a last resort. All right, like you're backed into a corner and you have no other option. Um. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is natural manure. True. The tree of liberty is a very hungry beast, infested with cursed ghosts. It desires your blood and the blood of its enemies.
Vice President Biden, it was an ugly debate, and it hit some lows. You called him a clown, a fool. You told him to shut up. I think most people.
We're 4 years into Trump, everybody. We're four years. We've been dealing with him for 5 years because of like the year up preceding the 2016 election. The idea that we're still playing this respectability politics game on like the national stage when it comes to Trump is so utterly ridiculous. Like, Biden getting called out here for calling a very obvious reality show clown a clown, or telling him to shut up when he is being interrupted nonstop is so supremely shitty. Like, fuck, man. The mainstream media is so weak.
Believe that the president was interrupting you, but it seemed to go against some of the language you've said about, not being divisive.
Well,
do you regret any part on your part?
It did, and I was trying to figure out how I could possibly have him respect the debate, respect the evening, respect the moderator, and get us an opportunity to speak. The one thing that became absolutely clear, he didn't want to answer any questions. He did not want to talk about substance. If you notice, not one single time that I can recall did he offer a substantive answer or criticism related to a policy matter. It was all invective. It was all personal. It was all things that have nothing to do with whether they're going to change these people's lives for the better. And I did get very frustrated.
Because it's a show.
I did get frustrated.
It's a show to him.
I should have said this is a clownish undertaking instead of calling him a clown. But the fact is, it was, I'll be very honest with you, I think it was embarrassing for the nation to see the President of the United States just hectoring like he did, and everything was about a personal attack.
Yeah, but to the point of the question, though, you're going to be meeting with world leaders who are going to get under your skin,
I've dealt with more world leaders than he has went from face to face over 8 years. And I've got under my skin, and we've had very quiet conversations. I've told President Putin exactly what I think of him. He knows it. We looked eye to eye. We know what's going on. I've made the same assessment to Milosevic. I've had the same kinds of conversations across the board. You can look back on all those international meetings I have. You can't think of a time when I've not handled it properly.
All right,
I don't have somebody screaming at me in the next podium when I'm meeting with a world leader.
All right, let's get our next question from Michelle Cruz. This is from Coral Gables. Used to be a registered Republican, but voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Her husband is in the crowd, I believe. What's your question?
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. As a mother of a police officer and the wife of a retired police officer, served 28 years, the term defunding the police is of concern and troubling. I understand that police departments do need reform. We need to serve and protect safely. And
You know what can be part of reforming police? Defunding them. That defunding them can be part of reform. Do you honestly think that when people are like, oh, you have to defund the police, and like people like her hear that, do they think that they mean like, oh my gosh, they're gonna send the police out, they're only gonna give them twigs and like a little loincloth, and that's how they're gonna have to like subdue criminals? Is that what they think? Because like I cannot recall a single incident that was highly publicized in the United States where we needed like police to have armored transport vehicles like in every single precinct across the America. Like, okay, I'm willing to accept that maybe New York needs a couple of those. LA needs a couple of those. Maybe. Maybe. I need to clarify that as a big maybe. But also, maybe we don't need to be spending a third of the budget of New York on police officers. Maybe we only need to spend, 15% of the budget of New York on police officers. And we can use that other 15% for social workers to respond to incidents that police officers respond to now. Except that social workers are better trained and don't need guns to do their job. Like, factually, you get more use out of investing in social workers than you do out of investing in police officers. And like the idea that like, oh, if you don't fund the police, it'll make them less safe. Being a pizza delivery person is twice as dangerous as being a police officer. Should all police people should all pizza delivery people be like, here's your gun and badge. You now deliver pizzas. Don't take shit from anybody. It's dangerous out there. Like, no, we don't do that. Like, it's a dangerous job, but we don't do that. I'm just saying, there are better ways we could be spending our money. And, maybe it's time to re-examine how much we invest in police when, let's all take a look. Shall we? I'm gonna Google how much money does New York spend on police settlements. Let's see here. New York City spent $230 million on NYPD settlements last year. That was in 2019. They spent almost $250 million on settlements for their police just fucking up, right? And killing people and hurting people. Maybe we have fewer police officers, or, give them fewer things with which to fuck up with, and invest that money into social workers who fuck up considerably less. Like, have you ever in your history of consuming news ever heard of a social worker of like cities paying out hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements because of something a social worker did? Or all social workers, I would wager you haven't, because it doesn't happen. It's not a big problem, unlike with police.
Properly. With that being said, I would like to know what you and your administration's policies in reforming the police, how those will come about, how they will be best handled to ensure police officer safety and the public's and the citizens' safety as well.
I grew up in a neighborhood where the guys I grew up
Biden's
in my
going to do
working-class
poorly on
neighborhood
this.
became cops, firefighters, or priests. I wasn't qualified to be any one of them. I have had overwhelming
bad
support
answer.
from police my whole career up until this year, as your husband will tell you. The vast, vast, vast majority of police are honorable, decent men and women who risk their lives
No, they're
every
not.
single day when they put on that badge and walk out that door. They have a right to come home safely. But
Again, we did a segment about this. We have it in the highlight videos called "They're All Bad Apples." Since the 1990s, we've known that around 40% of cops engage in domestic violence. And you know what? The other 60%, a lot of them know about it and cover up for their colleagues and don't address it and don't do anything about it. And on just that one issue, we have more than likely over half of cops being bad apples, right? So when we're talking about additional bad things, that's not including like acting as hitmen for capital or planting drugs or lying in court. We're not counting any of that stuff, just on domestic violence and covering it up. I know that Biden can't say any of this, but those are the reality. It's pretty awful. ACAB.
But there's bad apples in every profession. There are lousy commentators, there are lousy presidents, there's lousy...
And true, every wall will fall. He does have to say that. But I have to interject and just be like, hey, remember that segment we did a few days ago?
These senators' docs, and they should be, in fact, I can think of, I don't know any police department around that isn't happy to get rid of a lousy cop because it just reflects on them. And by the way, the same with the protesters. It's a right to protest peacefully, but once you pick up a bat and start smashing windows, once, in fact, you light something on fire, once you engage in violence, you should be arrested and held accountable. And I've never had a position different than that.
What happens if the police are the ones instigating the violence, though? Because that automatically makes the story that there was violence that they were responding to. Because our media is biased towards cops, because cops are often their sources for news stories. So this whole narrative of like Antifa being super violent, I'm not going to deny that there are cases where Antifa has like maybe thrown a rock or a bottle or been upset. Largely, though, turns out that peaceful protests, which scientifically we have discerned, studies have found that the vast majority of these protests are nonviolent. And it's just so weird to me that police seem to find violence in peaceful protest and respond to peaceful protest that they say is violent with violence of their own. Just saying. And turns out when you respond to peaceful people who are minding their own business and trying to say, hey, maybe we should hold police accountable for being violent, they respond with violence.
That from the very beginning. So what I'm going to do what I've done in the past. I'm going to bring all these interests together. Peaceful protesters, police chiefs, police officers, the police unions, as well as the civil rights groups in the White House, and sit down and decide what are the things that need to be done to improve and help police officers. I'm the only one who's talked about increasing police budgets. When your husband goes on a call that, in fact, is a 911 call, it's better if he or she has with them a psychologist or psychiatrist with them.
Or you know what? Maybe they should go with a social worker. Maybe just a social worker should respond to that call if it doesn't need police to show up. Maybe that's the solution here. Maybe what Joe Biden is saying is that we have a second police department full of social workers, And those police officers get sent on the less dangerous calls. You know what? I'm in favor of this plan. I'm in favor. You know what? Fund the police. If by funding the police we can open up Police 2. We'll call it Police 2. And Police 2 is just full of social workers that go on the less dangerous calls. And you know what? I'm fully in favor of maybe you know what? Let's take some of the budget from police, like the normal police, and give it to Police 2, because Police 2 is shiny and new. They need the additional funding. Why do you want our Police 2 officers? Why do you want them to die? Huh? Why? Just fully fund Police 2. That's all I'm saying. Like, why do you hate America? Why do you want more Americans to die? Just fund Police 2. Yeah, no, you dial 912 to get the not violent police.
Someone who knows how to deal with someone who is not
surprisingly woke and
so
4D chess playing Joe Biden.
In addition to that, I also am proposing that we spend significantly more money on community policing. The reason it worked, my son used to be an attorney general of the state of Delaware. The idea is you get the police, you get the law enforcement together with the community so they know one another. Because that kid walking across the street with a hoodie on may be the next poet laureate. It doesn't mean that child is going to be in trouble. And so we got to make sure there's more communication. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Exactly, every wall will fall. Let's get that trending. Fund Police 2. So community policing is being discussed, and I think that in general, community policing is a good idea. The issue here is that a lot of liberals hold up community policing as like the thing that's going to save the police. The problem here is that even in small communities, we have plenty of those in the United States, by the way. Even in small communities, local police, the ones who know you, can be just as dangerous as the police who have no idea who you are. So it doesn't solve all your problems. It does help. Not going to say it doesn't, but like the idea that it's this panacea to like the wide range of problems that plague policing in America is just not accurate.
As president, bring together a national commission sitting in the White House with me and working this out.
All right, our next question is from Nicole Maddox. She is an undecided voter. Nicole, what's your question?
Hello, Vice President Biden. So as an African-American female, I have never lived through what I'm living through right now. And at times I don't feel safe in this country. And so my question to you is, what would you do to stop extremist and white supremacist groups?
Stop what, I'm sorry?
White supremacist groups. And what would be your approach to police reform to ensure that people who look like me and my family feel safe in this country?
Number one, the president's own FBI chief has said, director, the greatest domestic threat to terrorism are white supremacists. White supremacists. And when you have a president saying to one particular group of white supremacists that, in fact, stand down but stand by, that is like a clarion call to get ready. Get ready. It's totally inappropriate. These guys are driving me crazy. I love them, but I can't see when they walk by. But all kidding aside, here's the deal. We got to make sure that police have, when we interview police for the job, that there's a more thorough interview process. There's more background checking being done and attitudes. It matters. The cops are like kind of like school teachers. Everything lands.
Look, this is also good. You should deeply interrogate cops during their interview process to find out if they have internal biases. The issue here is that because we keep saying we need more and more police, there's always this demand for police officers, which is why the training time for police in the United States has shrunk over time. And that means now you can train police officers in like 3 weeks. And the idea that like I'm going to generalize here, a town in the southern United States where there's not a whole lot of black people might not interrogate somebody very closely if, about their views on race. Like, maybe that's not the case. And you know what? It also turns out that we have literal gangs among police officers in like larger departments like LA. It turns out also that we have a lot of racist and white supremacist police officers. That's another problem that we have. And we've known about this problem for a long time. I believe there's FBI data on it. So the idea that maybe interviewing people, especially if the people who are already part of police departments are committed racists, will solve this problem. I feel like this is kind of liberal, silly liberalism right at work here, right? I just wish we would address the underlying issues that are causing these problems instead of putting bigger and bigger band-aids on, which is all policing really is. Okay?
On their desk, no matter what it is, whether it's a child that's in trouble on the street or whether it's somebody who has a mental problem or someone who's robbing a bank. And you can't expect them to have all this broad knowledge to how to handle everything. They need more.
Also, just to address your point, the Big Earl, it's true that, having the mask on isn't going to stop the microphone from being contaminated. However, I have noticed that they have different colored tape on the microphones that they're handing out. I think to differentiate them specifically for that purpose so that they can disinfect them between each questioner. Either disinfect them or like replace the wrapping. So I think they've already taken that into account.
More help. They need more money, as a matter of fact.
And also true that masks don't stop 100% of airborne particulates. Depending on the mask, some of them do, but the ones we've seen so far do not. However, they do cut them down by about 60%. So that's a positive. It's better than nothing.
Fact. But in the meantime, what we have to do is make sure there is, quote, it sounds, all the tough guys are going to say it's a silly word, sensitivity training, understanding other cultures, know what people.
Sensitivity training is good. However, if you already have a bunch of racists or have a culture of racism or classism, this sensitivity training is just going to be a joke that they laugh about when leaving the room and do not consider again. There has to be like a desire to learn about this stuff. Otherwise, it just kind of becomes like fodder for, the Ben Shapiro types of the world.
People are like, what they're thinking about, how they act, what is consistent with the culture that they're from. It's important we know that. We're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation that's so diverse. And it's very difficult to make sure police officers are trained enough to be able to know what to expect in a community. But the biggest thing we have to do is make sure that they learn to deal with diminishing the kind of force that they use. What is the minimum force required in order to be able to deal with whatever the situation is? It's about diminishing.
The issue here is that diminishing the acceptable use of force sounds good. The issue here, though, is that no matter what sounds good, the ultimate kind of benchmark for police action has long been accepted as what would a reasonable man think and what would be reasonable to be afraid of. And a police officer, all they really have to do is say that they feared for their life. It doesn't matter if that's true or not. No one can disprove that someone wasn't. You can't disprove how somebody else feels. Like you can't. It's the same kind of trap that people use when they're like, "Oh, do you think Trump is a racist?" Well, it doesn't matter if he is in his heart or not, and it's irrelevant because we don't know. But what matters are the effects of their actions, and kind of a lot of what Biden is saying right now is that we need to rely on like the decency of like the desire of police officers to be good police officers. And I think that statistically we need to examine that there are a lot of police officers, and by the way, in our media all the time, that justify misuse of their power. So just throwing all this out there, okay?
Punishing the prospect of use of excessive force. It's about eliminating some things totally, like chokeholds. It's about making sure that no-knock warrants are changed so people know what's going on. There's a whole range of things we can do. The commission that President Obama and I set up early on was in the
Also true, every wall will fall. There are a lot of things that Biden is proposing here that will statistically lower the rate of police violence against citizens. That's true. I just think that also what he's putting forward are a number of arbitrary lines, specifically with what he was just talking about, where people will still be able to justify their use of force. It might be a little bit harder, but they can still do it if they have to. So there are a whole lot of problems with policing, and I'm in favor of the candidate who, improves policing more. And when I say improves policing, I mean makes it safer for citizens. And so far, it seems to be Biden. His piecemeal reforms might not be enough, but they are better than nothing, and they are definitely better than the alternative.
The process of doing that until this president got elected. And what happened was, if you notice, there has been sort of a dog whistle out there. That is that everything's about division and hate. The reason I decided to run for office, I hadn't planned on running again. I give you my word, after my son passed, I wasn't going to run again. But when I saw those people coming out of the woods, literally the fields, carrying torches in Charlottesville, screeching that, if you close your eyes, remember what you saw. Their veins bulging, preaching anti-Semitic hate, the same exact language used in Germany in the 30s, accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. And when a young woman was innocently killed, what was the question asked of the president? What do you think? He said there are very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything remotely like that.
Riding with Biden, baby.
Constant dog whistle. And it bothers me a lot.
Mr. Vice President, though, the critics and Donald Trump himself will say that you had almost 50 years, working in government and legislation and as a vice president, and you weren't able to accomplish those things then.
Yes, I was, and I wasn't president.
What the fuck, Lester Holt?
He points out to the criminal justice reform bill, and you and Barack Obama served at a time when you had both houses of Congress and still couldn't get some of these things done.
Yeah, we did. We let 18,000 people got clemency. He got 2 or 3, what he's talking about. We had the violent crime rate was down 15% in our administration.
Now, here's the thing. Violent crime has been going down for a very long time in the United States. And it seems to have no relation to how much we fund the police. And this is also just a great screenshot here. But yeah, the idea that Biden takes credit for the violent crime rate declining, I don't buy that. I also just, I think Joe Biden has contributed negatively over the years to the safety of the common folk when it comes to, especially when it comes to policing. I'll just say that. That being said, the policies he's proposing for his own presidency are good policies. They're good improvements for the most part. And he's the only other option. So, this question is really irrelevant and just kind of shitty.
15% down. You didn't see these white supremacists rising up. Look, one thing I learned a long time ago, I got involved because of the civil rights movement when I was a kid. My state is the 8th largest black population. No great shakes. I'm not making myself out to be a great civil rights leader, but that's how I got involved in politics. And one of the interesting things was that I came back from Wilmington after my city was burned. 20% of it was burned to the ground when Dr. King was assassinated. And I had a job with a very prestigious law firm. But we were the only city in America since the Civil War occupied by the National Guard with drawn bayonets for 10 months. And after I got admitted to the bar, I decided I couldn't do this. I quit and became a public defender. And I remember going down to, if you ride the Northeast Corridor, you go from Washington into New York, you go by the Wilmington station. I used to have to interview my clients down there before their arraignment. And what would happen is that I found that I thought that black and whites would never get together again in Delaware. And here I was, almost 40 years later to the month, in January of 2009, waiting for a train to come from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, carrying a black man, about to pick me up to take me 147 miles to Washington, D.C. to be sworn in as president and vice president. And I called my three, this is God's truth, I called my three kids up. One's a social worker, one was running the World Food Program USA.
See, Joe Biden has a leg up on police too, guys.
General. And I was standing on the platform. I looked over the east side, which had just been leveled, and what they call the 3rd Street Bridge had been burned. And I said, look, guys, I said, don't tell me things can't change. Look what's happened. When I stood here 40 years ago to the month, that was burned to the ground. Now look at it. Look at it. And I talked about there's hope. But I made a big mistake. I didn't realize that you can't defeat hate. Hate only hides. It hides under the rocks. And when you give it oxygen, when you breathe into it, you bring out the worst of people and you legitimize them. That's what's happened. We've legitimized these people who engaged in hate based on race and color and religion. And it's wrong. And the way we have to deal with it is we have to make sure that we equip every agency, federal, state, and local agency, with the tools that are going to be bringing people together.
Vice President Biden, on that note, we're going to have to take a short break. We've got more.
He's doing very well. Very well. However, I would just say that saying you can't defeat hate feels kind of defeatist to me. I think we can defeat hate. We just have to do better, okay? Let's see. I appreciate it done randomly. I'll take a look at that. Yeah, I will see if I can get that working, okay? I will see if I can get that working, okay? I appreciate you, and I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. We'll try and get some stream captions going, okay? I'm a big proponent of captions. I like them. So why not, right?
More questions from our voters, and we'll do that from Miami in just a moment.
Oh, and thank you, I the Big Earl. I appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing. Hell yeah. Make Nazis ashamed again. Make fascists ashamed again, too.
Like
2 hours.
families have.
Welcome back, Miami, and the town hall meeting with former Vice President Joe Biden, taking questions from undecided voters. Our next question comes from Danny Lavandera. Danny, what's your question?
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. Teachers need to be in the classroom, but I believe that this needs to be done in a safe environment for all. What are your plans to ensure that schools are safe for teachers as well as students in the middle of this pandemic?
Number one, depending on the circumstance in terms of the readmission rate, the transmission rate in your community, that would have a lot to do whether the school should open at all, whether the chance should be taken. That's what all the senior doctors and immunologists say. So if you have a high rate of the spread of the disease in your community, it's better not to open that school. But if you're at a place where it's less than under 1, then in fact, it's possible to open. but you have to open safely. And it requires 4 things. It requires making sure that you as a teacher, my wife as a teacher, has the PPE to be able to open safely so
He
your
said
health
PP.
is in good shape. That because children can communicate the disease as well as contract it, number 1. Number 2, you have to be in a position where the children are able to be in smaller modules. That requires more teachers or spreading out students in a way that you don't have large groups of, if you have a class of 25, you end up having.
Here's the problem with what he just proposed. We always need more teachers in the United States. The problem is that we tend to have education funded on a state level. And so a lot of states, what they'll do is they will, well, for one, they'll connect school funding to the surrounding property values and property taxes. So if you live in a rich area, your school is well funded. If you live in a poor area, your school is underfunded. And when those things happen, it turns out it's much harder to get more teachers. And you know what areas tend to get underfunded and tend to send their rich kids to private schools? Inner city areas. It's why inner city schools are so underfunded. And like typically, like, you know, if I just say inner city school, the mental picture that you have in your head is probably not a shining golden hall of learning, right? It's probably pretty run down. And the issue here is with Joe Biden saying, well, you know, we just put more teachers in schools, we, you know, do all of this. The problem is it takes money to do that, and a lot of school systems aren't equipped to do it. And we don't necessarily have a federal government that has historically gone into schools and been like, hey, here's money to outfit you with, you know, the personnel and the equipment you need. At least not to a significant enough level, especially in inner cities. So,
2 classes of 12, for example. So
also, true done randomly, I feel like we should just have like a year of school from home. But I'm also not an expert on that, or I don't have a ton of like data on that, and I haven't seen a ton of data on that, so I'm not sure if that would have an overall good effect, though the increasing prevalence of stories about schools shutting down because of COVID infection rates and becoming like hotspot areas does make me think that it might be a good idea.
You have smaller groups. Number 3, that the sanitation capacity in this school is upgraded so you're able to keep everything from the laboratories to the hallways to the surfaces clean, and they're able to be done. And fourthly, to make sure that you're in a situation where there is a circumstance that you know that there is not overcrowding in the school, so that you have enough teachers, as I said, to make sure that you can spread out the children. When that is done, then you can more safely open up. That's what and I'd be happy to send you a copy of the actual plan I wrote back in July, based on the recommendations of the leading scientists in the country as to how to safely open. Because what people are worried about, they're worried about going home, the child going home with the disease, spreading it to the grandpop or grandmom or the older member of the family, and them getting very sick.
Because it turns out children are excellent carriers of the virus.
There's not even been any experimentation done on testing children for a vaccine yet. That's a different issue. But in the meantime, you can open safely, limit class size, make sure the hallways are open in ways that they're not crowded, everybody wearing a mask, social distancing, ventilation taken care of in the schools so that you're able to make sure that it is not lingering in the air. And they're the kinds of things, and it's estimated by the superintendents nationwide to open every school in America safely would be about $200 billion.
All right, Danny, thank you for.
And that's a big expense. But also keep in mind that $200 billion is a big expense, but the Trump tax cuts were like in the trillions of dollars. I think it was like $13 trillion that got cut from taxes over the next 10 years. So if we just rolled those back, which overwhelmingly benefited the ultra rich, and when I say ultra rich, I mean like billionaires, we would actually be able to pay for stuff like this. Also done randomly, you have a good point there about there are a lot of people who can't do online learning. I think that it would be a really good political move to, especially when investing in infrastructure. Usually people think of infrastructure as like roads because typically internet has been handled by private companies. But I think it makes sense to have, well, personally, I'm not in favor of ISPs having more and more power. I think they should actually have less power. In fact, I'm not even convinced that we necessarily need competing ISPs because they've essentially just divided the country into territories where they mutually decide to operate. But I think it makes sense in those rural areas where people don't have internet that we should be building the physical infrastructure needed to reach those people, connect them online. And if people don't have computers, I think at this point, our world is so interconnected by technology that we should just, you know how people like 10 years ago were like, oh, Obama phones, like they were going crazy about like government, like not government handouts, but like government sending poor people phones. Like that was a big conspiracy theory. I don't even think it was true. But you know what? Maybe we should give people like cheap operational laptops so they can connect to the outside world. I think that would be a fine thing. And especially because in a lot of rural communities, there are a lot of poor people who can't afford a computer to hook up to the internet. And giving them the means to do that would mean a whole lot. And especially, same applies to like people living in the inner city, paycheck to paycheck. It would mean a whole heck of a lot to get those people connected online. It would open up a lot of opportunities for them too. Like not just for schooling, but like work or anything else really. I know, for example, my entire career has been built doing stuff online. So it certainly helped me being able to connect to the internet.
For your question, our next one comes from Cassidy Brown in Orlando. Voted for the first time in 2016. Nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
Hey, Cassidy.
Hello, Mr. Biden. My youngest sister is in high school right now, and I knew whenever I was graduating high school,
She looks like a Hillary
college,
stan.
that I wanted to obtain my degree and start a career before starting a family. Having access to birth control and safe reproductive health care was imperative in making that true for me. So considering the new Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, what are your particular plans to protect women's reproductive rights in the U.S.?
Number one, we don't know exactly what she will do, although the expectation is that she may very well move to overrule Roe. But the only responsible response to that would be to pass legislation making Roe the law of the land. That's what I would do.
All right, we will take a short break, and we've got more questions for
Good
you,
answer.
Mr. Vice President, as we continue our town hall.
But also
from
pack the courts. We should do that too. I don't know if the Democratic establishment will do that, but it's what we should do. You absolutely shouldn't be campaigning on that. Absolutely not. But it's what we should do if we win. Riding with Biden.
Choices between the job.
What I miss.
Protests. And we are back at our town hall in Miami with Joe Biden, and we've got more questions from our voters. Let's go to Ismael Eliano, who voted for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, but has voted Republican in the past. What's your question for Mr.
Looks
Biden?
like a Hillary
Vice
stan.
President. So you talked a lot about unity and division, but it seems now more than ever, there's a divisiveness in the country that goes way beyond disagreeing with policy or whether you have made the right decision or not. It's either you're with me or you're against me. The role
Here's the thing, guys. Disagreements on policy can, for some people, come down to you're either with me or against me. For example, if you're a Republican, I think it's very consistent to have that sort of thinking if you are buying into the logic that millions of unborn babies are getting killed every year. I think that's a very consistent opinion to have. Like if you view your opposition as like pro baby murder, I think that's a very consistent opinion to have, that like people being pro baby murder aren't people you necessarily want to agree with. You know, you're either with me or against me, having that kind of mentality. Similarly, if you are a trans person like myself, and you encounter someone who is like, yeah, I don't think trans people deserve the same rights as cis people. Like I don't think that you're actually the gender you say you are. And as a result, I don't think you deserve the same like rights or considerations. I can't coexist with someone like that. You understand that, right? Like if somebody is like saying, no, you're not a person deserving of the same rights as me, you understand I can't coexist with that sort of attitude. In the same way, like someone who's like, yeah, I'm not racist, but I just think black people are inferior. And like you think that this hypothetical person thinks that because black people are like genetically inferior. Well, then it's perfectly consistent for him to not get along or be able to coexist with black people. And like even if you kind of break that down to like lower levels of racism, like, oh, it's not a race problem, like it's not a biological race problem, it's a sociological problem with their culture. I just don't think we need to fund their areas as much because they're so prone to crime for reasons I will leave nebulous and not really dive into or examine because they make me uncomfortable. Like people who are like that, it's consistent for them to not want to associate with black people, right? Like all of these things are divisions that are consistent with the views that people have, and they're entirely dependent on differences in policy. Anyway.
The role of president, in my opinion, should be to unify as much as possible. So what 3 actions will you take as president to get us back to being one country
politically expedient
versus several little, fiefdoms that are trying to yell each other about who's wrong and right?
Well, first of all, there's no reason why you should know, but I think, I'm not asking Lester to confirm, but he's heard, my entire career, I've been able to bring Democrats and Republicans together. And now people say, well, that was the old days, Joe. Things have changed. Well, the only thing that's changed is the way in which the politics that has been moved by some in the party have just gotten really ugly. I think what happens is, I think when people see, if in fact I'm fortunate enough to win, I think the absence of the president's willingness to go after and hold anyone accountable who disagrees with him, like he did to his former attorney general down in Alabama when I campaigned against him when he left the office, people are going to be less unwilling to compromise, number one. Number two, I think if you take a look at what I learned a long time ago is that it's always appropriate to question another man or woman's judgment. It's never appropriate to question their motive. I learned that lesson very early on. When I got elected to the Senate, I didn't want to go because my wife and daughter were killed between the time I got elected and the time that I was sworn in. And a senator named Mansfield, who was a majority leader, took me under his wing and said he wanted me, and I insisted meeting with me every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I thought you got assignments from majority leaders. No senator gets an assignment. Took me about 5 weeks, Lester, to realize just taking my pulse, see how emotionally I was doing, because I agreed I'd come and stay for 6 months till they got organized. And what happened was, I remember one day I walked into the Senate, and if you look at C-SPAN, you know that big gold arched door you walk through to go down to the well. I walked in for my meeting, and as I walked down to the floor of the Senate to find out when the last vote was going to be before I walked out the other side, because I went home every night to see my kids, there was a senator who was excoriating two people who became very close friends of mine, Bob Dole and Teddy Kennedy. They had introduced the precursor for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I thought it was heartless. So anyway, I was more afraid of missing my meeting with the leaders, so I went in, sat down in front of him. This was last week in May, and I'd already figured out why I was seeing him. And he looked at me and said, "What's the matter, Joe?" And I went on and I said, this particular senator had no social redeeming value. How could he be so heartless? How could he not care about people? How could he say a curb cut was inappropriate to have, that buses had to have lifts, et cetera? He looked at me and said, "Joe, what would you say if I told you that same senator and his wife 2 years ago were reading the paper in their hometown? There's a picture of a young man in braces from under his arms down to his ankles and two steel crutches, 14 years old, saying, 'All I want for Christmas is someone to love me and take me home.'" So what would you say if I told you they adopted that young man?
But you know, I don't think...
I would say that it has nothing to do with how awful it is to advocate against, against the Americans with Disabilities Act, which also isn't perfect. It doesn't go far enough in a lot of ways. But that is whataboutism, by the way. Like, it's not addressing his concerns. It's just like, oh, but they're good people because they did this other good thing that's unrelated to the thing you are upset about at them for.
I think you got to the heart of Ismail's question, which is something tangible, something you can do as a new president.
I learned from him, he said, it's always appropriate to question another man's judgment, but not their motive. Once you question a senator's motive, you can never get anything done. I say, you're in the pocket of the cement industry. Let's see if we can get a transportation bill passed. It doesn't work. And that's why look, when President Trump had already been elected, I was vice president. He had already been elected. And I put together a group that came up with almost $9 billion to deal with cancer.
Like, basically what he's saying here is that if you question the motives of senators, they won't vote with you. But Republicans aren't going to vote with him anyway. Like, not with Mitch McConnell in office. Like, basically Mitch McConnell's revolution to Republican politics was just voting no on every Democratic endeavor. So, like, they're not going to vote for you even if you are as nice as possible to them, because what you basically said is, oh, you can't question their motives. Okay, you can't question their motives, but their pattern of behavior, their judgment, Joe, indicates that they're not going to vote with you even if you're nice, and you're also not going to vote with them even if they are nice. Like, that's what your story is saying. So, like, it doesn't actually fundamentally solve anything here. And then it's one of the frustrating things about establishment politics right now.
Research, $9 billion. They said no one would vote for it. We had a total of only, I think, 41 senators and something like 118 House members. 398 House members voted for it, and 96 senators voted for it. My point is, you stop questioning motive. You go out and you debate the issues, because we've all gotten down to the point where everything is about attacking the integrity of the other person. And the last thing I would do is make sure that we, in fact, I reached out constantly, which I did as vice president and as a chairman of a committees, Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committee. Reach out and brought the opposition in.
No!
Last point. For example, they say...
No! You don't bring the opposition into... This is why Democrats are so bad at wielding power. No, like, there's this obsession, right? So, like, for example, under Abraham Lincoln, they had, like, this very contentious cabinet. And that has for so long been held up as, like, this ideal because, oh, you know, it's people disagreeing and they have to agree and, like, come together on a solution, and, like, that will be both sides will temper the other. But you have to do that in a situation where people are willing to compromise. And we have, for so long, been beyond that point. So the idea that you should empower your opponents to get your policies passed is ridiculous. No. If Biden wins and we flip the Senate and we keep the House, we should in no respect be inviting Republicans or conservatives into powerful positions where they can wield influence. No. Like, the last 4 years have shown us that we need to completely crush our adversaries. We need to use our power better. And part of that is disempowering our opponents, and the other part of that is to use our power to help people and let the help stand for itself. Like, I don't know, maybe passing Medicare for all and making and suddenly no one has medical bills anymore. That would be perfect. That'd be a perfect example of how you should wield power. This whole inviting your enemy into your camp to make decisions is like some real Dragon Ball Z level bullshit, like Goku befriending Vegeta kind of shenanigans here. And it doesn't actually play out like an anime in politics.
I said, Joe, what are you going to do if you get to pick, the next Supreme Court justice? It says advise and consent. You need the Senate to give advice and consent. Every president who's pulled us together has said, this is what I'm thinking of, and gone to Republican senators and Democratic senators and said, what do you think? You put together amendment. You put together coalitions. That's how you deal in a democracy.
Yes, you put together coalitions within your side, and then you try and convince people over. You don't put together a coalition between yourself and the people who disagree with you on your major policy positions. Now, again, I'm gonna clarify this. You should work with Republicans when it is expedient to do so, when it is useful to do so. So what I mean by that is that sometimes Republicans will agree with you on a certain issue. Will agree with progressives on certain issues. You can kind of see that in how, for example, Tucker Carlson will lean into like a progressive agenda. Okay, well, if on that one agenda item, we can work together on that. But you shouldn't bring Tucker Carlson in with all of his baggage, with all of his, history and ideas, and place him on like the Senate Judicial Committee. You shouldn't do that. Work with him to get his vote on singular issues, and that's it. Like, what, you want to put a transphobe on the Judiciary Committee? No, that's ridiculous. Like, you don't want to empower people who might agree with you on one issue, but on everything else disagree with you, right? That's just silly.
All right. Peter Gonzalez has next question.
Welcome to Miami, Mr. Vice President. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. I was raised in Hialeah, Florida, and I've been living in Coral Gables for the last 20 plus years. Cuban American and Venezuelan voters here in South Florida are being targeted with messages by the Trump campaign claiming that a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for the radical left and socialism and even communism. What can you tell people in my family, my friends,
God,
who are
I wish.
understandably concerned
I
with that
wish
issue
this was the
that
case.
would make them feel comfortable voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
And let me just point out, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left.
I look like a socialist. Look, I'm the guy that ran against the socialists. Remember, I got in trouble in the whole campaign. 20-some candidates. Joe Biden was too centrist, too moderate, too straightforward.
He has to do this, but it
Biden.
makes me sad.
I have taken on the very people that, in fact, we're worried about. I've taken on the Castros of the world. I've taken on the Putins of the world. I've taken on all these dictators. I haven't cozied up to them. I'm the guy that's been straightforward with them. I'm the guy that's let them know it stops here. It stops with me. It stops with me as president. I am no more a socialist or a communist than Donald Trump is. Well, I won't say it. Anyway, So they need not worry.
No, say
Just
it,
look
Joe.
at the record.
Get him.
There's not
Get him,
one
Joe.
single syllable that I've ever said that could lead you to believe that I was a socialist or a communist.
All right, we've got time for, I think, one more questioner. Mateo Gomez joins us now. First-time voter, came to the U.S. from Colombia at age 2. Welcome.
Spent a lot of time in Colombia.
Thank you, Lester, for the introduction. Vice President Biden, thank you so much for coming to Miami and speaking to us today. If you win in November, there will be a 56-year age gap between you and myself. My generation, Generation Z, is growing up with school shootings, police brutality, and protests, and the inability to earn a livable wage, even when holding advanced degrees like myself.
Hey, Zoomers, you're in the same boat as I am.
White male, represent my generation over the next 4 years. And please, Vice President Biden, can you guarantee me that the American dream still exists?
We've got about 90
I'll
seconds.
get the end.
He has to say
yes,
yes,
number one.
but
look, with age comes
doesn't.
wisdom, hopefully. I've been there. I've watched. I'm the guy that's talked about when the 9/11 generation getting so badly damaged. I'm the only one you've heard speak in the last 5 years about how your generation, my granddaughter just graduated with honors from Columbia Law School, in fact, is having trouble. The fact that I have 2 granddaughters that are in school, in college, and 2 more children who are in high school. They, in fact, your generation has been really put behind the 8 ball. You get all these degrees, you end up with all this debt, and
so
you're
what are you
in a
going to do
position
about
where
it?
you can't get a job because no one's hiring, or if they're hiring at very low wages. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that you get the opportunity. That's why I'm going to eliminate a lot of your student debt if you, in fact, if you come from a family less than 125 grand and you went to a public university. I'm going to make sure that everybody in this generation gets $10,000 knocked off of their student debt as we try to get out of this god-awful pandemic. Going to make sure that the
only
opportunities you have
$10,000
are consistent with, for example,
something.
If you're a first-home home buyer, you haven't even had the opportunity to gain enough income to be able.
But by the way, those are the eyes of a guy who's internally thinking, "I am never going to be able to buy a home." What the fuck is he talking about?
Have a down payment. The first-term home buyers are going to get $15,000 credit to be able to buy their first home, because that's how people accumulate wealth. That's how they get started. That's how they move.
The idea that a $15,000 like boost to being able to buy a home is genuinely going to help people. It will. It'll help some people, but for a lot of people, again, $400 is more than they can bear. On top of just living, right? So like, I don't think this is gonna help a ton of people. Okay, I mean it'll help some people, but this is kind of just like indicative of how Biden is about everything. Like, okay, it'll help some people. It won't help people like me or a lot of the people I know, but I'm sure some people will find it like a nice thing.
We're going to make sure we recognize you, advance you, and make sure that you look. My children, my grandchildren, you are the future. You are the future. I owe, as I said, for example, I made the comment that I view myself as a transitional president. They meant, is that one term? It's transition to your generation. You're the best educated. You're the most open. You're the least prejudiced generation in American history. The future is yours, and I'm counting on you.
Oh man, he's so dead-eyed.
Thank you. That is going to conclude tonight our town
Man,
hall. Our thanks to former Vice President
that was a
Joe
real
Biden,
depressing
as
answer
well
to
as
his
our
question.
participants here in Miami, and all of you at home, we should note that well before the president's illness, we extended an invitation to him to participate in a town hall with us as well. That invitation still stands. There's a busy road ahead in the run-up to Election Day, including the vice presidential debate just 48 hours from now with Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. I'm Les.
All right. Well, thoughts, hopes, feelings, concerns. Look, Biden's doing a lot better on the campaign trail, kind of in the spotlight here than I thought he would. Yet again, like my main problem with his initial campaign run or not campaign run, with his initial showing in the first debate was less that he himself was doing poorly at delivering his message, and more so that his policies directly run counter to what will be effective with people. Now, that might be a problem in a normal race. This isn't necessarily a normal race. He's working against one of the least popular presidents that has ever existed in the history of America. And I believe now at like on 538, they're projecting his chances of victory in like the, 80 to 90% range, like high 80% range. It's not good enough from like a progressive perspective, but you know what? It's probably going to be enough to get him to win this race. That being said, that's also assuming that election day goes as planned, and that there isn't like some sort of massive quasi-legal coup that occurs that is then thrown to the courts to decide the outcome, kind of like 2000. So, yeah, I mean, also Archangel the Cobb, yes, abolish the Electoral College. It's an ancient institution created by racists to maintain white supremacy, and it should be gone. But, yeah, that exactly, every wall will fall. Like, this is better than nothing. That's kind of my takeaway from a lot of this. I'm disappointed. There are a few things I'm pleasantly surprised by, but for the most part, disappointed. But you know what? I can live with being disappointed and fighting again another day versus being blown the fuck out by fascism. So those are our two options right now. So I'll take the one where I'm disappointed and can work for a better world.